You might cause the end of the world, and I don't care anymore. I'm out.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, where I toast you to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, but not for the first half of this first episode. This is episode 109. Regardless, not for the first half of this episode, because we just got Amanda the Adventurer 3. I played through the whole thing, made my video on it and the franchise in general, but I wanted to kind of ramble here because it felt good. Cool? Are we cool about that? Are we cool? Are you cool with that? Is it cool if I do that? Cool. So, first of all, Amanda the Adventurer is one of my favorite indie horror series we've gotten, right? And now that it's finished, this is one of the very rare instances where I can say definitively my opinions on the entire series, because Poppy Playtime is unfinished, FNAF is ongoing forever, Bendy and the Ink Machine is there, but, the Bendy series is still ongoing. We have the 2 5-chapter games, but there's still more to come. This is one of the first times, or one of the few times, where a horror indie franchise has concluded, has ended. This is the last game. As far as we're aware, maybe they change their mind and make a fourth down the line. But as far as the story goes, I don't really see how they do that. Because the story is wrapped up with such a nice bow that if they made a fourth, it would just kind of ruin everything. They need to move on. They need to make something else. I personally believe so anyway. And I'd love to see what they make next. Because, look, I love Amanda the Adventurer. Clearly, I like their games. I can't wait to play whatever they make after Amanda the Adventurer. That being said, and we'll get into the story and what my thoughts on are for the overarching story, but I've seen some people be like, oh, well, they could make it in the same universe, just have Hamlin, just talk about, like, rescuing another child from Hamlin, or, like, falling victim to Hamlin. It's like, okay, I get it. But the problem with doing that, and we'll get into it, I think we'll shift over because it's hard to talk about the story without going over the story. But the problem with doing that is that Amanda, or more namely Rebecca, is so central to most of what Hamlin is doing that, like, anyone else doesn't matter as much. Just does not matter as much. Rebecca is the key player here, and if you take her out, there's just much less to do. There's much less to think about. I mean, several kids were killed during Amanda the Adventurer 3, or at least finally put out of their misery, and nothing really changed or mattered. It still was Amanda the Adventurer. So it wasn't until Rebecca was removed that the story actually ends. So what is the story of Amanda the Adventurer 3? Well, I made my video on it on Friday, and you should go check that out for, like, the tight timeline. But I can ramble a bit more here. Amanda the Adventurer is a story essentially about a demonic cult disguising itself as a corporation. Now, is everyone who works at that corporation part of the cult? It doesn't go into that. I would assume not, because even in the tapes themselves, like the security audit we get, there are internal tapes that refuse to recognize personnel of the company, which to me says that there is, like, a shadowy CEO level of employee that is probably the actual cult, and the people under them are just following orders. So that would be my guess, and that's why we have that moment where it's like, these 2 individuals have been identified, but they will not be identified on this tape for personal reasons, or some weirdness like that. But we get pretty much the entire mission statement of this cult right before the end of the 3rd game, where we have this sermon that's playing on repeat in the background of the chapel. And if you actually stop to listen to it, everything falls into place. Because this sermon is saying, like, hey, and look, it's a cult, it's crazy, they're kind of cooking. They've got good logic. Because their whole mission statement is, hey, you've been told that on the first day, God made light and began the creation of the universe. And the sermon is like, that is a lie. Even in itself, it's lying, because it's saying that God created light, which meant he made something when there already was nothing. And this cult is like, that first nothing, that initial nothingness. That's what we are meant to be. That is the true world. That is the beautiful nothingness, the void, what they call the great nil. Nil meaning nothing. So this cult's logic is that demons and devils and all of this is just trying to return to what we were meant to be, aka nothing, that beautiful, freeing nothing. So their mission statement is to bring about demons, bring about devils, and try to bring about this age of darkness to return back to the great nil. Now, their cult's logic is the way to do that is through children. Not only have they recently been born, so they are the closest to nothing, but in their minds, they have not been tainted by truth, which is what they say in there. The idea that, they are still young and impressionable, and their imaginations can, quote, still think of the impossible. So that's kind of their big catch, is using the imagination or the mind of a child. The mind of a child can still conceptualize a demon because it has not been tainted by what's possible. They can imagine the impossible, and in that imagination, a demon can be born. So that's their logic, and that's the cult, right? This cult's ideology is that they need to lead the children into this path of darkness to imagine the demons hard enough that they appear. That's their whole mission statement. So once you hear that, everything starts falling into place. Because one of the big questions about Hamlin is why. We had this thinking that Hamlin was some demonic entity because we have contracts. We have the tape from the first game where they're making Rebecca recite demon names by tricking her. She has to say Pie Man, which is close to Paimon, a demonic name. What was another one? It was Pie Man. I think Baal maybe was one of them for Baal. God, what was essentially it was like that, where they took two words and said, just repeat these two words for the animation process or whatever. But those two words, when said together, are a demon name, and they're making her unknowingly repeat them to plant those seeds. And it does work. We get the one tape from the end of 3 where Amanda is talking about a birthday party, which is for Rebecca. It's one of those memory tapes. And she mentions that, she was thinking about all of these presents and what the presents could be. And, she was looking at the gift and imagining the present inside of it. And then it ends with her saying something along the lines of, but there were thoughts that she didn't share. Thoughts she was afraid to share with Daddy. Thoughts she didn't tell anybody. I think that's those demons, right? The idea of, when she has those thoughts, it's the demons that are being implanted into her mind. And we also, if I remember correctly, see something like this in the second game. When you make Amanda go to bed without a nightlight and she's left in the dark, she begins to have that nightmare. I think that's a taste of these demonic seeds being planted. So Hamlin was doing something demonic. We know this. We know Hamlin was doing something demonic, but we had no clear reason why. It was okay, why then are we making a show? Why then are we the Pied Piper? Why then are we turning children into cartoons? What is going on? I think, and we never get a clear answer on this, which I think is smart. They never directly come out and say, here's the entire mission statement. That would be, I think, giving the game too much away. I think that is smart that they're holding some of that back. My thinking is, it seems clear to me that the tapes are a medium, but not necessarily containment. So some of them are. It seems clear that some of these tapes contain soul or memory or what have you of these children. But some of the tapes, I think, make much more sense to just be a medium to communicate with these characters. Like Amanda, like Wooly, like Chicken Scratch, the possum that Jordan is turned into. Because if you think about it, right, we have the one tape, every tape we have has Amanda and Wooly, right, for the most part. But these tapes are mentioned specifically as tapes that contain Amanda, not tapes that contain Wooly. I think I know what tape contains Wooly. It's a tape we're never meant to have. So let's slow down for a moment. there are tapes that do contain Amanda, and there are tapes that don't contain Wooly. Which to me, but Wooly still appears in them. So to me, these tapes, whether or not they contain this character, are a device to communicate with this character. Now, part of me wants to say that Amanda and the Amanda demon are one and the same. Because there is that moment where, breaking the final tape, the Amanda demon dissolves, and that Amanda character's spirit appears, closes its eyes, and moves on. So, like, part of me is like, that's the same thing. But in the second game, they make a very clear distinction where the Amanda character on the screen asks the Amanda demon to give us a chance. So if there's communication, I think they can't be the same thing. So what are they? They never really go into that, but I have thoughts. So the creation of the Amanda demon happens when Sam tries to get in contact with Rebecca after all of this has been going on. He essentially breaks into, I assume, Rebecca's room, and then there's a tremor, the Amanda demon is here, kills Sam, and it escapes. My thinking was, if they were already pretty deep into the mind of Rebecca, and suddenly this trusted figure appears and says, get out of here, that could have caused dissonance. That could have caused enough shock to disrupt what was happening. But if the minds of these children are being used to imagine demons so vividly they become real, is the Amanda demon one of them, the Colton anomaly? I don't think so. But I think Hamlin was trying to find out if it was. Because again, the Amanda demon, while very violent and while it does kill things, is in sync with Rebecca. It never attacks Rebecca. It screams with her when the shepherd appears, which we'll get to, and it willingly is destroyed when Rebecca destroys the last tape, even though its entire deal was keeping those tapes safe. So, clearly, this Amanda demon holds no ill will, if not a protective role, for Rebecca, which, if it were a real demon, I doubt that would be true. Not to mention the fact that, well, it looks like the Amanda character. So what is this thing? What is this? My thinking is that it is part, or was going to be demon, but turned into Amanda. Because going back to Hamlin's mission statement, these demons are born out of the imagination of children. They are what these children think the demons would look like. So, when we start piecing this together, right? If Rebecca is resentful of this Amanda character that is being created, and is scared of this Amanda, of everything that's going on, and suddenly, before the demon in her mind is ready to hatch, Sam interrupts, maybe the thoughts of the demon that were there, and the thoughts of Amanda that were there, congeal and form something. Yeah, that's my best guess, because again, we don't have details on the specifics of this. But the thoughts of the demonic thoughts that were there, plus the Amanda character combining, and then the shock emitting out this creation. Hamlin was right, things can be born out of the imagination of a child, but they were not able to successfully do it because of Sam's interruption. And although that does get Sam killed, it eventually gets Rebecca freed. So, he kind of did a good job. But, immediately there's an issue. Is this demon, as much as they want to study it, they can't control it. It's so powerful and fast, there's no way they can contain this thing. They need to lure it back in. So, we have the Amanda character, which seems to be able to summon the monster, but can't fully control it. And the Amanda demon, who is protective of that character because it's protective of the tapes. If you break one of these tapes, this demon shows up very swiftly to end you. This demon is very protective of these tapes. And Hamlin knows this. They use this against it. They even make Shepard, whose sole goal is to destroy these tapes. So what is Shepard? Well, they find the most servile man they possibly can in Marcus Moatman. And they literally quiz him on, how obedient are you, even if it goes against your core beliefs? And he's like, oh, very much so. It's like, all right, perfect. Come on in, bud. And the interesting thing here is, Marcus is not a child. You know, like there's this talk about like, oh, Marcus was a bad boy, and I wonder if he likes what he grew up into. But like that's a metaphor. That's like exaggeration. It's not actually true. We see video of Marcus. He's an adult. He's being interviewed for a job at this company. But I wonder if Hamlin, knowing this process didn't perfectly work for Rebecca, are hoping that someone who isn't a child but is sufficiently submissive would be able to recreate a similar result. Because they do recreate a very similar, if not more effective result in a larger, stronger, more controllable demon in Shepard. Shepard, whose entire goal is to destroy any tapes containing the Amanda character. And, you know, is very strong, is, again, larger than the Amanda demon, more imposing in a way. But it's interesting that worked. Because it doesn't work with... Because it shouldn't, based on the cult's mission statement. And I think, you know, this goes to show that the cult isn't right. And they're working with a few loose screws. But they are hitting on something that is real. This creation, essentially. So, I go back to the tapes being a communication device, not necessarily just storage. Because there are tapes that do contain the Amanda character that the demon is possessive over. And if all of them are destroyed, the Amanda character is released, the demon is destroyed. Now, it's important to note what this thing is containing. Because Rebecca notes when the demon dies and she doesn't free it, meaning she hasn't broken the last tape, she mentions something along the lines of, now I'll never be whole. Or now I'll never be complete. My thinking is either part of her memory or part of her soul is in these tapes. And in releasing that demon, in letting that character move on, she becomes whole again. Maybe the part of her that is Amanda is returned. Because after all, Amanda is a character based on her. So maybe part of that is that the Amanda part of Rebecca returns to Rebecca. Well, then we look at Marcus. I think Marcus is much worse for wear than Rebecca. I think part of the reason why Rebecca is such an interesting test subject to Hamlin is because, for whatever reason, she withstands whatever they do to their test subjects much better. Because we look at the 8 children in the lead up to the chapel, and if you look into those tanks, they're essentially just a floating brain with like some other assorted body parts, and that's all that's still in those tanks. Meaning the body around it has nearly fully dissolved. But then we get to Rebecca, who seemingly would have been in there first and longer, and she is dissolving. There are parts of her that are actively rotting while she's alive, which must be incredibly painful, but she's mostly there, especially compared to the previous children. So I think part of the reason why Rebecca is such an interesting test subject is because she can withstand whatever is going on here. But you look at Marcus, and we never see Marcus, but I think the reflection bit in the second to last tape is indicative on whether or not Marcus is holding up well. Because we get that moment where he's like, I don't like looking at myself in the mirror. It's like, okay, I guess maybe... At first I was like, he doesn't like seeing that he's a sheep and remembering. But that's not true, because we get to see him look in the mirror. For a moment, there's this like decaying corpse in the reflection. So I wonder if that is what Marcus currently looks like. He's not holding up well in that tank, wherever he is. And that reminds him of it. But to wrap back to the main point I was going at, if these tapes are containment, and we know some of them do contain the Amanda character, what tapes contain Wooly? Well, I think we know of one of them, because there's been one anomaly with this series that has had no good explanation, and it was in the very first game. There are 6 bonus tapes, but there's also a secret one. One of them you cannot access. You cannot get your hands on this tape, but there is video of it in the code. And if you go to find that video, it is an incredibly long video of Wooly just sitting at a table and waiting. Nothing happening, no weirdness, no uncomfortable stuff, just Wooly waiting. I think that is the tape that contains Wooly. At least one of them. That is the tape that contains Shepard. That is the tape that contains part of Marcus. And whenever he's not needed to keep Amanda in check, he returns to that calm, carefree environment where it's boring, but seeming to everything Marcus has said, that's what he'd prefer. He'd prefer something normal and stationary and safe to the wacky things that Amanda makes them do. So theoretically, if we found that tape and broke it, we could free Marcus, whether or not he wants to be. But I think that's why we don't see Wooly die. We see Wooly have a full breakdown and essentially leave the tape. But I don't think that's Wooly dying. You see that wool that's left on the ground, and some people interpret that as Wooly just essentially giving up. I don't think that's what we're seeing. I think Marcus, as Wooly, knowing that we keep pushing and pushing and digging, knows that whatever happens next is gonna be bad. And he finally snaps. And the last tape, he finally snaps. And his entire goal, his entire reason for entering, was to keep Amanda in check. And after all this time, he's been doing that dutifully. And for the first time in his life, he grew a backbone. And he finally said, "This isn't worth it. This sucks. You might cause the end of the world, and I don't care anymore. I'm out." I think the moment we see the wool on the ground is the moment Marcus leaves any tape with Amanda in it and returns back to his original tape, the one we'd never get access to. The one thing he wanted, a place that never changes. He gets it. Because if he died, I think Shepard would die with him too. But we know that after this ending, Shepard is still running around trying to kill us, which tells me that he is still alive. He didn't die in that tape. He simply left. Since I think these tapes are as much of a communication device as they are containment. So all this to say, I know some people were a bit put off by the abruptness of the end of Wooly's story, but I think it makes perfect sense. I think either, no matter what, Marcus finally gives up. Marcus finally like, it's not worth it. I hate you all. I'm leaving. And Marcus leaves. And Shepard, the demon whose sole goal is to destroy the tapes and destroy Amanda, either he confronts us and that both of them fall into a pit, or before we get there, the Amanda demon gets the jump on him, and although is badly injured, manages to take it out, survive, and come back to us. I think that makes perfect sense. And then as far as people, I know I've seen a lot of people online basically be like, I don't like that Wooly is suddenly a villain. It's like, well, I don't think suddenly is a good word here. Frankly, I think you have bad media literacy. It was very clear from the first game, the very first game, it was clear that Wooly kept trying to guide Amanda to stick to the episode. Now, at the first episode, in the first game, it was up in the air. Maybe it's an employee, maybe it's her father just trying to keep things normal. The first game, Wooly is already trying to keep Amanda in check, which is his entire purpose. Then we get to the second game, where it's a little bit more aggressive, and he's getting a little bit more fed up, And I think the second game was where I really started to think, and a lot of people really started to think, that Wooly was an employee of Hamlin, one that went in to keep Amanda in check, because Wooly seems to care a little bit less about Amanda's well-being and just wants her to, chill. And then we get to the third game, where at this point, Wooly is fed up with us. We know that these characters can see through the screen. I mean, first of all, we give things to them through the screen, which doesn't make any sense. But there's that one tape where a girl runs away in the first game. And she's watching Amanda during her birthday. She's not paying attention. And then she's out the door and they never see her again. But we get that scene at the very end where they're talking about oh, it's mint chocolate chip. It's your favorite. And then right at the very end, Amanda on the screen goes, "I love mint chocolate chip." So even through that TV episode, the Amanda character is able to see through the screen and know what's going on outside. So no shit that Wooly's pissed the fuck off for the entire third game. Because he's been doing his job dutifully, long after seemingly everybody at Hamlin has died, Wooly's one job he has been dutifully doing, keeping Amanda in check. And we've been interacting with these tapes for 3 days. And within those 3 days, we have made it to the center of the Hamlin facility. If I was Wooly, I'd be fucking pissed off too. Because I gave up my life for, like, be Marcus for a second, right? If I'm Marcus, I gave up my life for this company. I will serve them no matter what. They have given me one job: keep this cartoon character in check. So I will let them put me into this cartoon, and for the rest of my life, all I will do is keep this cartoon character in check. And for like 10 plus years, I'm doing such a good job, and I'm keeping her in check, and I'm making people happy, and I'm helping Hamlin, and everything is fine. And then who is this person? Why are they talking to us directly? Oh, why does Amanda like them more than me? Hold on, this isn't very good. Oh, now there's a possum. Okay, now there's a possum. It's okay, Amanda doesn't like the possum? Okay, cool, we can not like the possum together. Why are you still here, sir? And then the next game is, oh, the possum's still here, great. Amanda, what do you mean you like the possum more than me? You've met the possum for 1 day. I've been here for 10 plus years. Why do you like the possum more? Hey, you fucking stop. You're ruining everything. Right? And then, you see the underground of the Hamlin facility, a place you never even got to go. You gave your life up to this company. You didn't even know a chapel was down here. So it makes total sense to me that this employee just crashes out. That he's like, no, this fucking sucks. I gave up my life for this company, and one person ruined it in 3 days. I'm done. I'm out. Like, that makes total sense to me. And the idea of him being like a villain, well, he isn't a Hamlin employee. There was hints that he was a Hamlin employee from the first game. So, like, Hamlin is the villain. Whether or not... Look, do I think Marcus is personally an antagonist to Rebecca and Sam and all of this? No. I think Marcus is a dutiful peon for a bad company, and he finally cracks by the end of the third game. Like, I don't think that Marcus is sitting here like, ooh, I can't wait to make Rebecca suffer more. No, I think Marcus is like, well, I need to keep Amanda in check. That's what I was told to do, and that's what I'll do, golly gee. So, like, I think Marcus makes perfect sense as an antagonist. Because, again, he's not necessarily Hamlin. He's Hamlin's tool. And he's been overused, overworked, and he's over it. So I think Hamlin, Marcus, and Wooly make perfect sense. The one thing that I don't think gets explained, and maybe it could have been helpful, but we don't need it to be explained, is why Rebecca is such a siren call to children. Because it seems like Hamlin was actively scouting children to be added to the shows as part of their ploy. But Amanda the Adventurer in particular was the show that was making kids disappear. Which, like, that's interesting to me. Why Rebecca specifically was the one to do that. Was it because of the Colton anomaly being inputted into the tape like that gave her more power and more draw? Possibly. There's one iffy problem with that timeline-wise. We get that one tape in the third game, the secret tape, where the Hamlin representative is like, we heard there were some reports of kids having some very small amount of kids having some adverse effect to Amanda the Adventurer. We found out it was an underlying condition that could get triggered, but even though it's rare, we're still going to collect all the tapes. So please, if you have a tape at your house, give it back to us. We'll give you a free gift. Don't worry about it. To me, that is showing us the Hamlin public excuse for gathering as many Amanda tapes as possible to destroy them and destroy the demon alongside of it. So, if that's their plan, you would think they would do that pretty soon after the demon got loose, which was immediately. So if that's true, then kids would have been disappearing before the demon was formed. So that's where one of the issues comes in. Maybe it's just the timeline is bigger there and it seems smaller, or maybe there's another reason. Maybe it's because Rebecca was a child actor and maybe the other children weren't. It's unclear. It could all just go back to the fact that Rebecca is a particularly imaginative kid, because Sam did stress a few times that like the show begins and ends with Rebecca because she has such a great imagination and he wants to share that imagination with others. So maybe that's it too. Rebecca is just the first kid that Hamelin got their hands on who's incredibly imaginative, not just like, I guess, the normal amount of imagination, whatever that would be, right? So it could just be that she is particularly imaginative. And it could be that she's resilient to the serum. Because again, there are dissolved children we're talking about. And Rebecca is just like injured versus a floating brain in a jar, right? Did I have anything else to add here? Oh, we finally know why it's the Pied Piper, Hamelin, because we had like, oh, well, Amanda the Adventurer is leading the children to the company. Sure, but the mission statement of the cult is we need to lead children down the path of darkness. So the Pied Piper being someone who leads children, perfectly fitting. Is there anything else Amanda the Adventurer related I wanted to talk about? Because I didn't get many questions about it. So I'm trying to just go off the dome like this, the franchise is over. This might be the last time we talk about Amanda the Adventurer at all on this channel. I kind of want to make sure I cover all my bases. I will say, as a cohesive franchise, it's so nice to have a finished franchise that has said everything it wants to. Part of the reason I love Five Nights at Freddy's is it is an alive franchise. It's a franchise that morphs and changes as the months go by. And that's something that's really fun to theorize about, because something that could be so close to true, it's basically canon today, could be disproved tomorrow. And that is, some people find that frustrating, and I get that. Sometimes it is. But to me, that's mostly exciting. That's really exciting. That's a really fun space to play in, where you never can get comfortable. You can never settle. On the other hand, it is nice to look at a finished work and make stronger conclusions about it. Because I do think Amanda the Adventurer 3 is a masterclass in ending an ongoing story. Because while it gave us a lot of answers and a lot of really direct information that is incredibly helpful, it didn't give us everything. It still has gaps that need to be solved and things we can debate about, but it gave us a lot of really good information. And it did kind of go along the way that a lot of these indie horrors do, where the way you do that successfully is you give us really, really clear and direct information about the context of what's going on, not necessarily about what's going on. Like the mission statement for the cult. It is so useful to know that they think they can summon demons to end the world through the imagination of a child. That is incredibly useful. We finally have a motive for our villain. But they never go into the means. Never once are they like, oh, and here's scientifically how we're doing it. Because that would ruin the fun. That's, it's like I was saying in my FNAF Will Never End video. It's very true crime adjacent, because we don't have really any information on the actual events. We have very, very small bits of information on the actual events of Amanda the Adventurer, how Rebecca is able to control these things, how those minds get put into the cartoon. We get the context, the why, the information around it. And with that, even though the franchise is over, the dust isn't settled. There's still things to talk about here. There's still mysteries to solve about this timeline. I mean, again, it seems like Amanda, the demon, and Rebecca are three separate entities. A lot of people, myself included, assumed that Amanda was an avatar that Rebecca was using and speaking through, and the demon was the thing they were communicating with. But when she breaks that last tape, there is a separate Amanda character that passes on and dissolves away and fades out, which seems to separate Amanda from Rebecca. My current thinking is Amanda is still something that Rebecca is speaking through, but it's part of Rebecca. Whether that's part of her soul, part of her imagination, who can say? But it's like, essentially, it's not a puppet that Rebecca is using. It's more like her body is in a tube and her mind is in the tapes. And that's why freeing that returns it to her and she's whole again. And when she can't do that, she will never be whole again. The demon, I've got no idea. The demon is, I think it's something that formed because Sam shocked whatever was actively going on by emerging suddenly, but I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's simple as Rebecca was in a pod and Sam tried to remove her from the pod improperly to escape, and that's what happened. Who can say? Because I think after a while, Sam just pretty much realized they were prisoners here and never going to be allowed to leave. So it was just a matter of, we need to get the hell out of this building, right? So who can really say exactly what happened, but we can theorize about exactly what happened. The ending that Amanda the Adventurer 3 got, or the ending that the Amanda the Adventurer series got, is what I can only hope Five Nights at Freddy's gets. I can only hope that the final game, whenever we get it, for the main story of Five Nights at Freddy's, gives us as much context as is possible without directly answering much. Because I think that's the perfect way to end these kinds of series. Leave some room for interpretation, leave some room for speculation, but give us the important bits. Give us the motives, give us the whys. We can fill in the rest from there, right? And I think for FNAF, we might need more than Amanda the Adventurer 3 gave us, because Amanda the Adventurer 1 and 2 gave us a lot to work with, and FNAF typically doesn't give us a lot to work with. But something similar, I think, is ideal. But all in all, it's been a wonderful time with Amanda the Adventurer. I cannot wait to see what Mangled Mall has next for us. But for now, what a great series. We have some time. I yapped longer than I thought I would, but we have some time for questions, so we'll go through them. We'll do some FNAF so it can be a Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Our first, if you want to answer your question on the podcast, feel free to send it into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. Our first question comes from CJ, she, her. Do you think Lolbit and Yenndo are canon, the same way Golden Freddy is in FNAF 1 and 2, a canon Easter egg? And or like how information we see in non-canon routes in the interactive novels is actually there. We just never canonically see it. If so, does this do anything lore-wise? Thank you for your question. Lolbit and Yenndo are big question marks, huh? Because like Yenndo does feel like it's supposed to be the Golden Freddy for Sister Location. But like, why? Why are you there? A part of me wonders if it was just the non-committal answer that Scott wanted to give for the Springlock suit of Night 4. Because, look, let's be real. If anybody was going to function like a Golden Freddy, it should have been the Night 4 Springlock suit. And then that could have been fun to piece together. Like, oh, that's what we were in. That's awesome. That would have been really cool. But, Scott's too non-committal for that. Lolbit is even stranger. If anything, Lolbit is one of the most mimic-coded things in Sister Location. You're telling me a program is taking over our computer systems and looking at us directly? That's crazy. That's really mimic-coded, isn't it? So I do wonder. I would say, to your point, they would likely, if they are canon, be canon in the way that, non-canon routes and endings are dealt with in this franchise. Like, look, do I think that in Security Breach, Gregory and Glamrock Freddy make their way down to Burn Trap, burn him and destroy everything and escape? It's possible. I don't think that happens. I think that ending does not happen, at least not then. Maybe they go back and do it, who can say? I don't think that Burn Trap ending is the actual ending that happened in Security Breach. But the fact that it exists as an ending, to me, is telling us that these pieces are there, and if Gregory went down there, that is what he would find. So, Lolbit, Yenndo, these characters that we only really see in the custom night, I'm not saying, when I say they are, they are canon, just not there, I think what makes the most sense is Michael Afton probably never sees Lolbit or Yenndo, even though they do exist and are at Sister Location. So I think that's where I land on them. Now, what does that do for the lore? I have no idea. Because frankly, I don't know if Yenndo matters. I don't know if Yendo's at all important for the lore. Lolbit, you could argue, especially now that we're getting more and more into the Mimic era. The idea of a computer program taking over your systems is very Mimic coded. And not to mention, since it's Lolbit, it's based off of Foxy, who is a character Fiona originally designed. So, we have a digital Foxy taking over computers. It's really Mimic coded. What would that mean for the lore? I have no idea. And frankly, I think I'm a little scared to think about what it would mean. Besides just maybe it's an offshoot of the Mimic. we see the mimiclings in Secret of the Mimic, where there's these little guys that are just like shitty little robots that can run around and do not much else. That I think, my thinking is, they're never fully explained. I like to believe that's creations of the Mimic mimicking what Edwin did, right? Like Edwin Murray, all he ever did was work. So if part of Edwin Murray gets absorbed into the Mimic's personality, the idea that the Mimic is just tinkering, going like, what if this trash can could walk? That kind of fits. So if that's something the physical Mimic is doing, could it not then be possible that a digital version of that Mimic is doing the same thing inside this digital realm? So maybe, if so, maybe Lolbit is a creation of that, right? Maybe a digital Mimic, maybe if Fiona, maybe whoever it is in this digital realm, like, oh, well, I'm going to make another Mimic, and then makes a Lolbit, and that's all Lolbit does. We see something similar in The Flesh, where the digital spring traps keep making new versions of themselves, and the new version kills the old version. And this happens repeatedly, right? Like, he makes a spring trap, and the spring trap makes a new spring trap, and the newer, better spring trap kills the old spring trap. Repeat. And that's really interesting to think about in the Mimic era, where it's literally a program that can make a better version of itself. Does the better version of itself then turn around and kill the old version? Well, if that's true, then Vanny killing Glitchtrap makes a lot of sense, right? The idea of Vanny being a creation of Glitchtrap, so Vanny turns around and kills Glitchtrap when it gets the chance to. Being a follower for as long as it needs to get that opportunity. That does make sense. So in that case, would that mean Lolbit is more advanced than Glitchtrap? I don't know. If Glitchtrap the one that made Lolbit? Probably not, because Glitchtrap seems to be a combination of an already existing Mimic program and the data from Help Wanted. But maybe that M3, that already existing Mimic program before it became Glitchtrap, made Lolbit? I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here. There's really no grounds to talk about, because it's hard to speculate about characters like Lolbit and like Yenndo, because we know so very little about them. How much are they important? How much are they Easter eggs for FNAF World? Who can say, But I think it is worth mentioning. It's one of those things that, like, are we going to solve what the Mimic's involvement is in Sister Location if we figure out that Lolbit is part Mimic? No. But in having that discussion, there is useful information that can drop along the side, right? So I think you're right to think about characters like Lolbit and Yenndo, wonder if they're canon, wonder how they affect the lore. And, best case scenario, I think you'll learn something about something else. And then you can start delving and focusing on that instead. Thank you for the question. I mean, hey, this recording is almost 45 minutes. I know there's some pauses in there, but I know we only did one question too, so I'm going to do one more real quick one. The next one is from Blue Link, they, them. I love FNAF as much as anyone else, but Pokemon has a chokehold on me for my whole life. I want to know who's your favorite Pokemon. Great question. I got a couple. My overall and for the longest time favorite Pokemon is probably Torterra/Turtwig, but as of late, Mousehold and Tinkaton are vying for that top spot. They are 2 and 3, and they move back and forth constantly. Some other favorites, though, Absol is a huge favorite of mine. Really pretty design, just pretty Pokemon in general. Chandelure, love Chandelure. I think that's all of them, though. It's one of those things. If I sat here, I could list you 20 Pokemon that I absolutely love. But if I'm thinking of top 5, it's probably Torterra, and then from no particular order, Mousehold, Tinkaton, Chandelure, and, I almost, maybe Gastrodon goes in there. I love a lot of them. I really do. I love Pokemon, man. Anyway, thank you for your question. And if you want questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. But until next time, as always, you've been watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.